I'm Jerry Fort. I'm going to read a story out of this book here called The Scary States of America, 50 Weird and Terrifying Stories, one from each state based on true events, by Michael Teitelbaum. And the state I'm going to read today is Connecticut. And this one's titled Dudleytown, the scariest place in New England. Here's an email that I got from a guy in Connecticut about a pretty famous haunted forest. Subject, Dudleytown, Connecticut. Jason, my name is Doug Stark. I know you collect stories about haunted buildings, curses on families, and attacks by strange creatures. Well, there's an evil forest in northwestern Connecticut that combines all those things. My buddy Andy Barlin and I knew about the 400-year-old family curse, the weird lightning strikes, the sightings of dark spirits, the glowing lights, the scary creatures, the bizarre phenomena of nature, madness, death, and insanity, and the lives destroyed by the Dudleytown forest. That's a serious forest right there. We just never thought any of that would happen to us. Andy and I grew up in Ellsworth, Connecticut. The best of buds. Every Halloween we talked about spending the night in the creepy Dudleytown forest. When you grow up in Connecticut, you get used to playing in the woods. But everyone talked about how there was something sinister about the trees in Dudleytown and how the place was always dark. Of course, no one ever actually spent Halloween there. Even after Andy and I were in high school and could drive, fear always won out over our curiosity. So our senior year finally came. We were each going to different colleges, and this would be our last Halloween together for a while. It's now or never, dude, I said to Andy 2 weeks before Halloween. Are we really going to do this, or are we going to spend the rest of our lives emailing each other about how we really should have done it when we had the chance? Andy rubbed his chin for a moment, weighing the choice between really cool bragging rights and hanging out with our friends. Yeah, he replied, shrugging, this is our last shot. Let's go for it. Bragging rights won. Andy and I took his car on Halloween night and headed toward Dudleytown. I think back on that moment every day. My life would be completely different now if we had just gone to a party that night, or maybe TP'd someone's house instead. The sun was starting to set as we drove the half hour to Dark Entry Road. Dark Entry Road? Man, if this were a movie, people would be laughing. Could it be any more obvious? Andy said, laughing. It is cursed, you know. It's the only forest I've ever heard about that's actually evil, I said. Yeah, I know. All that stuff that happened in England. Henry VIII was pissed. Henry VIII was pissed that Edmund Dudley tried to overthrow him, so he chopped off his head and cursed the whole Dudley clan. Horror, death, insanity, hemorrhoids. That's what it says. Andy joked. One of the Dudley kids thought he could escape the curse by coming here in the 1700s, but he just brought the curse with him. Remember the dude who bought the place after the Dudleys bolted? His whole family got some weird sickness and croaked. Then there was the general in the Revolutionary War whose wife was struck by lightning, even though it was a clear sky. That dude went mental, I said, trying to remember even more crazy stories I'd heard over the years. Uh-oh, Andy cried. We're leaving out Dr. Clark's nutcase wife. Remember? Remember, he bought the place in the 1920s. He had to go to New York City for 2 days. And when he got back, his wife was flipping out about a dark creature who ran out of the forest and attacked her. She went mental, too, and they put her in the nut house. Duh. Lady, don't you know Bigfoot when you see him? I said, even though we continued to laugh at all the horror stories we knew. I was starting to get a little scared. I couldn't admit it to Andy, but by the time we reached Dark Entry Road, which, despite its name, is actually an idyllic-looking lane that leads into Dudleytown Forest, I was thinking about bagging the whole idea and turning back. Unfortunately for us, Andy parked the car and started to get out. Doug, come on, let's go, he said. We could just go back and hang out with Mike and Jordan instead. Tell them we got lost on the way, I suggested. What? Dude, 1, we drove all the way here, and 2, we would get so much grief from them about being complete chickens. I'm going to see me some demons tonight, baby, he yelled. There was no use arguing with him. His reputation was at stake. We had to go through with it. We left the car at the start of the road, since we'd told everyone we'd go into the forest on foot, with nothing to protect us except our own wits. The sun was dropping low in the sky, and it was starting to get dark. Almost immediately, I noticed the total lack of sound, whereas a second earlier I could hear the wind in the trees, the chirping of birds, and the scurrying of squirrels and chipmunks among the fallen leaves. Now, nothing, not a peep. Did it suddenly get colder? Andy asked, turning up his collar and zipping up his jacket. Now that you mention it, I replied, the temperature did seem to drop when we stepped in here. And is it just me, or is there no sound whatsoever? Where's the wind? Why don't I hear animals? They're probably all possessed. Mwah ha 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 ha, Andy shouted, doing the world's worst Count Dracula impression. We continued on in silence. About half a mile in, we heard a weird scratching noise behind us. We looked around but couldn't see anything. What's that? Andy whispered, tensely pointing to the ground behind him. There, carved into the soft dirt, were the words, "Never return, Satan." Shut up, you just did that. I'm not a moron, I said, punching Andy in the arm. The Satan part is a little over the top, man. Doug, Andy said seriously, you and I both heard that noise, and I've been standing right next to you the whole time. I didn't do that, dude. Fine, I said. Someone put that there to freak out people like us who were coming here to check it out. Check it out. I don't know, said Andy. It looks like it was only scratched into the ground a minute ago. Look at the mounds of dirt around each letter. If this had been here for a while, they would have blown away in the wind. Come on, I said, surprised to find myself being the brave one. There are supposed to be some ruins of old Dudleytown houses at the end of this road. Maybe we can spend the night there. As we left Dark Entry Road and entered the dense forest, the final crimson rays of sunlight faded to gray behind the stone foundation of an 18th century house. There's nothing left of this place but some stones, Andy said, peering over the edge of the foundation. Suddenly, a white circle of light moved across the trees. Don't turn the flashlight on yet, I said. Let's wait until it's really dark. Doug, I didn't turn on my flashlight, Andy stammered. That wasn't you? I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. No, I whispered. Then what's that? Andy said, pointing at 3 glowing white orbs dancing among the trees. Not waiting for my reply, Andy took off, running deeper into the woods. Wait for me, dude, I shouted, following my friend. We had Satan telling us never to return, and now weird orbs were flying around. It was not the time for the two of us to separate. Andy stopped running, and I practically crashed into him. It's really dark, he said, trying to catch his breath. I'm going to put my flashlight on so we can find our way back. What about those white floating things? I asked nervously. I don't see them anymore, Andy replied, clicking on his light, but I think we should head back. I agreed. We're totally telling Mike and Jordan we got lost. I don't care how much grief I get. Now let's get the heck out of here. Andy's eyes suddenly opened wide. Looking down, he began grabbing at his shirt and pants. Doug, get them off of me, he shouted. Get them off. I shined my light on Andy's body, but I saw nothing. Get what off you? I asked, alarmed by the terror in my friend's eyes. There's nothing on you, Andy. The bugs, Andy screamed, clawing at his clothes, his face contorted into a mask of horror. They're crawling all over me. Get them off me. They're eating me alive. Doug, help. They're not real, Andy, I screamed, recalling stories I had heard about people in Dudleytown who had suffered from hallucinations. It's just in your mind, dude. It's just in your mind. Dude, you have to focus on me. Andy, focus. Andy dropped to his knees and began yanking at his hair. He actually tore a bloody clump of hair from his head. Get them off. I grabbed him by his shoulders, forced him to his feet, and shook him hard. Andy, I shouted, slapping him in the face. Andy. Andy jerked backwards, breathing hard, and he looked down the length of his body. Oh my God, Doug, he cried. It was so real. I saw big, disgusting bugs crawling over every inch of my body. I felt them. I felt them bite me. He clawed at his clothes, looking for bite marks and for the creatures that had just tormented him. Come on, I said, grabbing Andy's arm and handing him a bandana to hold against his bleeding head. We're leaving before anything else happens. With each step, the gnawing sense of doom inside me grew. Someone, no something, was watching us. Waiting. Small shapes darted through the darkness on either side of us. The perfect silence was broken by high-pitched shrieks echoing in the trees. I felt my chest tightening as we retraced our path. Andy clutched his head and breathed hard. I wanted to assure him that we'd be okay. Dark Entry Road was just ahead. I noticed as we approached the foundation. I was about to say, we're going to get home safe, but before I could speak, a flash of movement caught my eye. We both froze in terror at the sight of a swirling black blob rising from the foundation. The expanding blob changed shape, its inky blackness so thick that it stood out against the night sky. I can't move, Andy groaned through his clenched jaw. I'm trying to force one leg to go in front of the other, but I just can't move. Before I could respond, the shape enveloped me. I gasped for breath. The very life was being sucked from my body. I felt like I was about to pass out. Then images began to fill my mind. Mutilated, maggot-filled corpses lay strewn around me. I knew I would soon be one of them. Then I blacked out. Soft rays of sunshine woke me. Andy was sprawled out on the forest floor next to me. The corpses were gone. Andy? Wake up. I shook him gently. He opened his eyes with a start and jumped to his feet. Without saying a word to me, he headed toward Dark Entry Road. Wait up, I shouted. Andy turned and peered at me with a look of fear on his face. Never return, he croaked. Those were the last words my best friend ever spoke to me. We made it back home that morning. We had spent the night in Dudleytown and survived. But from that day on, Andy never spoke another word to anyone. The doctors at the institution have tried shock treatment to see if he'd at least cry out in pain, but he's like a walking dead man. As for me, pre-Dudleytown had always been a pretty happy kid. As for me, pre-Dudleytown, I had always been a pretty happy kid. Post-Dudleytown's another story. The voices and visions start each day around sunset and torture me throughout the night. Yeah, I'm not in a mental hospital like Andy, but I don't exactly get out much. Why didn't we just stay away? There you go. Don't go into Dudleytown. Sounds like a bad place. Okay, if you like books like this, or the paranormal, you collect these books. You like paranormal paraphernalia, all kinds of that kind of stuff. Get you this for your collection. Michael Teitelbaum's The Scariest States of America, 50 Weird and Terrifying Stories, one from each state, based on true events. You might enjoy this, having in your collection. Good stories in there, interesting. Make the hair on your arms raise up sometimes, some of them. All right, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. See you on the next one.